Welcome to Domino Theory, the podcast about politics, media, and business. I'm Christian Whiton, joined as always by co-host Mark Simon. We're also pleased today to be joined by Kelly Sadler, the commentary editor for the Washington Times, who was a special assistant to President Donald Trump in his first administration. But first, the lead-in. There seems to be a growing realization in the world that Donald Trump needs to be taken seriously. April 30th marks his 100th day in office, and he has had the most consequential and frenetic first 100 days since President Franklin Roosevelt and his New Dealers in 1933 created that standard for a fast start to an administration. We see this with immigration, where Trump has replaced an intentionally uncontrolled border during the Biden administration with one that is controlled. We see this with the economy, where Trump and Congress have at least set in motion the steps to avoid an automatic tax increase and preserve the pro-growth tax levels Trump signed in 2017. He also has mandated more of the deregulation of his first term that helped spur private sector economic growth. We see this with foreign and defense policy, where Trump has ended much of the foreign aid that seemed only to make foreigners hate us more. Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance have also given a stark wake-up call to Europe that its days of freeloading and mooching off of America's military are over. Trump's his willingness to negotiate with Russia to achieve peace in Ukraine also marks a fundamental shift toward realism in foreign policy. Finally, we see the world taking Trump seriously, or at least much of the world, when it comes to trade policy. Trump won quick concessions on immigration and fentanyl from Canada and Mexico in the first days of administration. He made it clear earlier this month that he intends to end persistent trade deficits through a return to the moderate tariffs that marked much of American history. He suspended those tariffs to focus on China and limit the economic trauma that any transition will entail, but he has made it clear that globalism is over for the United States. Japan and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent are hammering out a deal that should cement fair trade between the USA and our most important Asian ally. And China is so worried that it is calling America a bully, a classic case of projection if there ever was one. And as Mark has pointed out on Substack, Chinese leader Xi Jinping is having to embark on a charm offensive to places like Vietnam and Malaysia, governments that China previously would have expected to supplicate in Beijing. What a different world. Of course, not everyone accepts the need to take Trump seriously. I don't know what the strategy is for Democrats to win back Congress and then the White House, but what we have seen publicly is pretty weird. Many politicians in Europe seem to think they will make Trump blink on trade and security issues. China hopes that the many friends it has bought on Wall Street and U.S. influence organizations over the years will somehow save it this time from the looming economic collapse of its economic model, which required U.S. presidents to put America last. But we'll see how it works out for these holdouts. And that's the lead-in. Here to discuss these issues with us is Kelly Sadler. Kelly is the commentary editor and a columnist for the Washington Times. Often seen as a Newsmax contributor, Kelly started out as a beat reporter at Bloomberg News and later covered politics and commentary during the 2016 presidential election at the Washington Times. Kelly served in the first Trump administration as the special assistant to the president, where she coordinated surrogate coverage and talking points. She most recently served as the communications director for America First Action. Welcome to the show, Kelly. Mark, can you please get us started with a first question for Kelly?
Kelly, thanks for joining us. Kelly,
Go easy on me, Mark.
Okay, it's a tough question. Donald Trump is doing so much. You know, we're not even, it just, the idea that we're in day 89 of his presidency is just mind blowing. But he's doing so much. And you've worked in communications. Of course, you're a noted reporter in DC. What do you think what's the strategy that he has right now on really on a few issues? The first is his communication strategy on the trade war. What's he trying to do there? And then what's his overall communication strategy? What's his strategy on China? What do you think he's trying to do? And then we can come back to immigration later on. But on those two first things, what is the president communicating to the American people that he's trying to do on this trade war?
Well, I think he could communicate better. I think he could address the nation and explain exactly what he's doing. I think that Donald Trump is doing so much every day to own the news cycle and also to keep the Democrats on their back feet. They don't have a message. They're always defending the indefensible. But you'll have him on every Sunday shows. You see the administration flanked out on the Sunday shows. Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, Kevin Hassett. And they all seem to have different messages. Lutnick in particular seems to always throw a curveball to everyone else, and throws the message off base. But I think it's very clear holistically, if you look at what Trump's doing, he's trying to decouple our economy from China. He's trying to bring Xi to the table for a potential deal like he made in his first term. He's trying to siphon off those countries in the South Asian Sea, Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, Japan, South Korea, to all, basically the tariff ploy is to get them to the table so that they too cut off China, so that it's a global effort. We're seeing it with what he's doing with the EU and with Maloney today, come to the table. And it's going to be very hard because it's a dramatic restructuring of our economy. It's taking, globalism, and it's bringing manufacturing back to the United States. He said, you know what? Globalism did not work for the bottom 50% in this country. Their incomes did not grow. The top 50%, yes, of course, they benefited from it. But that was his entire campaign strategy. That was his messaging. And whether or not he can be successful in doing it, it's going to take, perseverance. And I'm worried with the pause that we saw last week with the other countries. It's just a little haphazard. It's sure as heck, scaring and spooking Wall Street. But he's not focused on Wall Street. He's focused on Main Street, but he could be clearer with the American people, the president himself, in terms of what he's looking to accomplish, when he's looking to accomplish it by, and what success looks like.
It's interesting you say that, Sarah. Mark, did you want to jump in and follow up?
No, keep going.
Well, I was just wondering because, I've always thought of the standard for screwing up being Bill Clinton, who overinterpreted his mandate. He won in 1992 with 43% of the vote. Bush 41 got, I think, 37. Ross Perot got the balance. Right off the bat, it was a bunch of things Clinton really didn't plan out. It was gays in the military about 20 years before the country was ready for that. It was the largest tax increase, I think, probably since the Roosevelt administration. It was Hillary Care. It was NAFTA. It was a bunch of things. And 2 years later, just really got smacked by voters. In fact, it was the first Republican Congress since, I think, 1954, early Eisenhower, where you had both houses Republican. Thank you, Bill Clinton. And I just wonder, is Trump really a genius? And I'm guilty of old think that we do a little bit what you're alluding to. You start with Sunday shows. I think those have been less relevant just because the people on the reporters are terrible. But, start and have sort of a theme of the week, at least. This week we're doing immigration. This week we're doing trade. Oh, this week the Japanese prime minister is here. Let's talk allies and China, things like that. Do you think, I don't know, we're just the mandate he got, which was, about 50%, good enough, and let's run with it and pretend like we got 60% and, things will be okay? Or do you think that this sort of chaos and frenetic activity will eventually have a consequence with voters?
I don't know. But to expect Donald Trump in his White House to have an organized weekly message focused on one thing is never going to happen. Working in his first administration, it was always infrastructure week. That was the joke because we never got through infrastructure week before the story turned to something else. I think you have to look at Trump through his actions, what he's actually announcing on a daily basis, what his team is doing, because there's a lot of noise. The Democrats like to call it chaos. And yes, it's a bit chaotic. Is it Peter Navarro that's leading the tariff strategy, or is it Scott Bessent? Is it Elon Musk? What is Musk doing? So it's going to come to fruition. I think it's cohesive in the fact that they're all China hawks. They all view China as the central problem, and everything they announce every day when they have some sort of announcement is something targeted specifically at China to get under Xi's skin and to, crash his economy, make him come to the negotiating table, give something to the United States. That's why you saw the pause on all of the other countries, except he ratcheted up the tariffs last week to 145% on China. That's why today you see him saying any, Chinese ship that comes into U.S. ports, we're gonna fine you $1 million. So he's, China's economy, we can discuss this, Mark, and I think you would know this better. It's on the verge. They beat their first quarter GDP numbers. But they don't import like the United States does. They're a communist country. They're in an economic crisis, and we're seeing some downturn in their economy. So how fast that comes, I don't know. Everyone's been predicting the fall of China for years upon years, and they somehow keep going. But I think it is a coherent strategy. I think it's one that everyone within the White House and the cabinet is working for. They could do a better job communicating it, but perhaps maybe they're not. Maybe they intentionally are not, because they don't want people to catch on to exactly what their strategy is. Trump likes the people, world leaders included, right?
Yeah, I think Kelly actually hit on that's the very, when I was back in DC, I don't have, I'm not talking to Peter Navarro or people like that, but I am, but like you guys are, but I do think it's 100% correct. I think the Chinese economy is a lot weaker than what people think it is. Ling Wei over at the Wall Street Journal is very pro Beijing. Her father was a communist general, so she always writes with a slant, but she's very interesting in the fact that she does seem to have a good feel for it. Right now, the unemployment, when young people graduate from college in China, maybe 35 to 40% of them get a job in the first year. In other words, there's mass unemployment there on college kids, and that's the class that causes problems. But the 5.4% growth rate, I don't know anybody. In fact, one group that the investment banking group in Hong Kong is probably the most feckless bunch of people in existence, and even they don't buy it. In other words, this is they had an export surge. They're surging their exports. I've even heard that their military is complaining that Xi Jinping is sending everything to the Russians because for cash and for oil. Macau is apparently a hot spot now of money changing for the oil. So I think Kelly's onto something here. I just wish that they would.
Is that because they have casinos, Mark? Is that why Macau?
The casinos are there. I mean, Hong Kong is now a major money laundering center on a large extent. When we talk money laundering, I'm not talking Al Pacino walking in with a bag of money. I'm dating myself and my age. In Scarface. You're talking millions and tens of millions of dollars a day moving through this very advanced financial system that they know how to get it through. But I do think Kelly is right. I think that they are targeting China. I always had a belief that when they came out, they were trying to mask that a little bit. Mm-hmm. I believe they were trying to mask that. And in other words, the whole thing has always been about China, but they didn't want to come out and smack them right as they are. But now they have punched them in the mouth, and I think Xi Jinping is worried about this. Look, he just went to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Malaysia. There is no one I know out here, even those who don't agree with me, who saw that as a sign of strength. He's God. He's the emperor. The mountain doesn't go to Moses. Moses goes to the mountain, as we used to say, or something like that. You go see Xi Jinping in Beijing if you want something. He's out there doing the, during the buy our stuff tour is what he's doing. Let our workers in, do all these things. So I think Kelly's spot on. I think basically they are targeting China. My question to Kelly on that would be what does victory look like to him? Do you have any idea there?
No, I don't. And how far can we push China without them taking some sort of countermeasure? We're seeing them build up their navy in the South China Sea. We're seeing them provoke their neighbors. They've long said they feel that Taiwan is a part of the motherland. What is it? How far is Trump willing to go in terms of, because his strategy is both economic and military. It's woven together. You can't separate the two. But we don't have much of a presence, and we're doing a lot in the Middle East right now. What is our ability? And if she does, let's say, take a grab at Taiwan or provoke the Philippines into some sort of combat or in defending their territory, what they presume is their territory, in the South China Sea, what will Trump do to defend those allies? as well as because he wants them to isolate China in trade. He wants to say, we export more of your goods. We import more of your goods than China imports of your goods. We're your number one trade partner. Decouple completely with China. But at the same time, when their security comes up for question, what is Trump going to do in that capacity, as well as how tight a bond is the Putin-Xi relationship? And I think that the whole Ukraine strategy with Team Trump is to reestablish ties with Russia so that Putin's relationship with Xi fades. But is that even possible? I don't know. And that's why there's so much uncertainty with what this White House is doing, that it'll be interesting to see if Trump sticks with this plan for the next 3 years.
What do you think the way the media is covering this? You go and just story after story after story after story. And, Google, it's just you type in a topic or go to Google News. It used to be sort of half and half, some conservative, some regular, then it was 2/3. And now it's just, it's NPR, it's MSNBC, it's CBS, it's just all liberal. You have to actually put a conservative outlet into the search for it to turn up anything like that. But it's all people rooting for Trump to fail, with the exception of some in the conservative media. I think the Washington Times has been great on this. The National Review has been terrible on this. I don't know if anyone even cares about them anymore. The Wall Street Journal has been terrible about this, both the news division and the editorial page. I think they're trying to ruin the news division, it seems. They're trying to, it's actually very difficult. It's increasingly difficult to tell the difference between the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, just the headlines. You could mistake one for the other. I enjoy checking the New York Times just because I like reading what.
I hate read them. I still have a subscription. Have it every Sunday. I get the paper delivered to my home. I hate read it.
But so I don't actually subscribe, but I just sort of want to know what neurotic women and emasculated males on the Upper West Side in Chelsea are worried about today. And literally, I think I was up to about 12. The first 12 headlines were about Trump. But maybe just dividing this into two. One is the media has clearly decided they're going to freak out about Trump again. And, 90% of their coverage is about Trump. This man lives rent-free inside their head, to use a cliche. In the conservative media, it's a pretty small bunch still. You still have never-Trumpers, maybe not as many as you used to. But, for example, just defending trade on his tariffs and the economics of, wait, with the exception of the Smoot-Hawley, which was only during the 30s, most of American history had modest tariffs. They worked pretty well, actually. It's not protectionist per se to have some revenue generation come from trade. And the balance of trade has been pretty bad since tariffs dropped below 10% in the 1970s, the Nixon administration. Just finding people to make that argument, it's not a big crowd. So I don't know. What do you think is going on with the media? It seems not to be responding to market signals here. Beneath the surface, is it doing that?
No, and I think that it's such an experiment because it hasn't been done in recent ages. It's a total decoupling from the establishment groupthink, the Washington groupthink, and so it's hard to have people be like, this is what he's doing. This is how because there's nothing to look back to in recent history to see this is when this worked then. And the Trump administration, to their credit, are going back to their first term in office and said, those steel and aluminum tariffs, they didn't spike inflation. All of the tariffs that we put on China at the time, inflation didn't spike then. And by the way, Joe Biden kept those tariffs going. But there is uncertainty, even for me, and I love Trump, and I'm an enthusiastic voter. I'm willing to endure whatever short-term pain because I've got faith that ultimately his strategy will be executed. But when he paused those last week, I'm like, oh, do they really know what they're doing? I mean, when he came out on Liberation Day with those charts and those numbers, and none of them really made sense. And I'm like, okay, well, this is not an apples to apples comparison. They're including tariffs, but they're also including things like VAT taxes and other barriers to trade that specific countries put on U.S. goods. But it wasn't clear or concise. And so I just hope all of this market chaos, to use the Democrats' word, will be for nothing if he doesn't see it through. But then, Mark, that goes to your question. What does success look like? Does it look like, we've got shipbuilders here in America opening up brand new plants and making these huge cargo ships? Does it look like, old manufacturing in Michigan, car manufacturers coming back? And that's where I'm going to get a little confused. Like, what sort of manufacturing renaissance does he want? Now, NVIDIA making their chips here, that is the AI, that is the next generation. But is it factory working like we envisioned it back in the day? I don't know. And when will that come to fruition? That won't come to fruition for many years. These investments take many years to break ground, to build. And Trump only has 3 more left, right? He's term limited. So then does the next administration come and uproot everything that he did? That's why it's so important. And I don't see the Trump administration doing this, to work with Congress to solidify everything that he's doing right now within legislation. And we don't even have a renewed Tax Cuts and Jobs Act yet. The one big beautiful bill, no one knows what is going to be in that one big beautiful bill. But all the work that he's doing could be undone in just 4 short years. So why would, business titans and leaders put all billions of dollars or trillions of dollars in investment in the United States with that uncertainty?
I think that's I think the real issue that I have is, as a boss, as a manager, executive, when I look at Trump, sometimes I look in his place and it looks like nobody says no inside that White House. I'm serious. It just looks like, okay, Howard, go out and say what you want to say. Okay, Peter, go out and say what you want to say. And then he has these meetings and he goes, Stephen Miller, and he lets Stephen start talking. American people don't know who Stephen Miller is. It's like he's going to win the room, but he's not going to win the people. And, make this person talk or have JD explode on Zelensky. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
that was must-see TV, Mark, though. I mean, that was one overall.
To the networks.
I'll never forget. We were live on air. I was on Newsmax, and I'm like, what? Can we get the replay now?
No, I mean, I see it, but my thing is like, I think people don't mind chaos with Trump. I think they understand it. I think we also know that it's against it. But my whole thing is I look at it sometimes and I'm going like, it's like he's very derogatory of the CHIPS Act, which I am as well. I mean, in other words, you're buying this business much more so than you had to. Because Trump's position is this is a great place to be. Come on in and do it, and I'll use a stick. The Democrats basically said, we're going to bribe you and give, because I'm here in Taiwan. I know all the TSMC guys. NVIDIA is really a Chinese company, just a Taiwanese company. Jensen Huang proved that yesterday when he went to Beijing and told the Chinese, because he's pissed off about the duties, he told the Chinese, our blood, our family, we're part of China, which I hope people come back and smack him on. It's good to look, and he said that, and it was like, basically, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he basically said, China is our other home and things like that. The problems that you always, I hate to say, you get inside the Chinese American business community. But I do think there is this issue of communication. But here's what I'll give Trump. Ran a media company. I used to be a major media executive in Asia, not anymore. The Chinese took care of that. But I look at the Wall Street Journal, and I mean, first of all, they're going down in subscriptions, and we're about to see their next quarter results. I was an investor in News Corp, still play it every once in a while. For full disclosure, the Wall Street Journal is going down, and what's happening is alternative media is coming up, and I think they don't know how to deal with it. And like for example, they just don't have any idea how Trump communicates around them, how he works around them. You talk about, like, for example, Newsmax. I mean, what does Newsmax mainly do? They keep Fox conservative because Fox is definitely afraid that Newsmax will start pulling in more readers, as they have. They've already got now 2 decently rated shows, that beat CNN sometimes. So they're not the number 4, they're the number 3 network. So I think the issue really is for the media, Kristen, is I think they're becoming, a lot of these mainstream people are becoming irrelevant. And it's hard. It's really hard to walk around with that name card that says New York Times and nobody cares. In other words, they know that they can go to some guy on Twitter and they can get their message out and more people will see it, you know what I'm saying? And more people, they want to see it. There's apparently something like, I was told this guy, he does social media work for some of the campaigns I'm involved in. Uh-oh. He said there's basically about 100 accounts, conservative accounts, that really, if you follow those accounts, you'll pretty much get everything in the conservative message. He said Washington Times and Washington Examiner are one of them. National Review is not one of them. I specifically asked him because everybody knows that they're not part of the ecosystem anymore. But I think the fact is, I think Trump instinctively knows that. I've never seen a better media president. And I think the fact is he's going to war with these guys, and that's why he's always thinking about it. He doesn't – the moves that he's made at the White House, is the White House press room, moving people around in seats, has actually not only been hilarious, but has been really wise because he's basically reordering people. I mean, I know the AP thinks they're the be-all and end-all of the world, but I can tell you right now, the AP, their influence is going down so far because it's just general news. I hate to say it. It's breaking news most of the time. And you can just buy it from AFP. You can buy it for 1/5 the price. The French will sell it to you. Or you can get it from BBC, or you can get it from CNN. You don't need AP anymore.
No, I mean, but you see them all losing their minds over it too. Contracts being downsized. Rachel Maddow, her head is exploding. You have ABC's The View, which is supposed to be some sort of news division, but their ratings are in free fall. At CNN, you mentioned Newsmax is beating them now in primetime. Now we're an upstart, right? We're a nothing. CNN used to be the dominant news source. Now they can't get, even 100,000 people to tune into their primetime. But I think it's because the American public has been lied to. We've been lied to now for years, starting in 2016 with the Russia collusion hoax. Throughout Joe Biden's entire presidency, when they were cheerleading him on, saying that he didn't have dementia, that it was just a minor incursion into Ukraine from Russia, that there was no, migration, there was no crossings at the illegal border. At the border, there was no illegal crossings, that there was no crisis, that inflation was transitory. And they kept with those. They kept lying to us and losing their credibility more and more. And so it's allowed a lot of upstart podcasts like this one, like Joe Rogan. People just disillusioned with the traditional media space, searching other outlets to get another perspective. There are no gatekeepers anymore, and that is what annoys legacy media the most. They've lost their power.
We have an office here that's going to take this podcast and they're going to send it out all over Taiwan. And, so people will see it also in Singapore. They'll see it as well from we have a little thing down there. But you're right. In other words, they're not really used to having that. Let me ask you a question about that. This is an inside the Beltway question. One of the things that I notice all the time, and I live outside the Beltway, but one of the things I notice all the time in the Republican Party and in the president, it is the attitude, as you said, is the attitude in the media about the Trump people. I mean, what do they think of the Trump people? Because it always amazes me when I hear people call. I mean, I don't think Howard Lutnick's a very popular guy. He's probably not a guy you want to hang out with at the club, but he's not dumb, and he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. What is it about the Trump people that the elite media doesn't? That's a deep question. But what do you think it is about them? They just don't like him. Besides the politics. And really the politics of Trump, George Bush was further to the right than Donald Trump. And Mitt Romney was further to the right than Donald Trump. What is it about the Trump and the Trump people that just drive them insane?
I don't know, but what is it about Elon Musk, right? The left loved Elon Musk They embraced Elon Musk. He was saving Ukraine with his Starlink. He had the Tesla cars, the EVs, the wave of the future. He's good. We're going to be on Mars. Like, Elon Musk is such a wise billionaire that's going to revolutionize the world. And he goes into the Trump administration and starts, finding waste, fraud, and abuse. And now I think his name is more hated than Donald Trump's is among the left. So they've made him a boogeyman. And why is Elon Musk a boogeyman? For saving our taxpayer dollars, for identifying programs that have no value in the federal government. And then you have your Democrats defending just the dumbest grants to countries with no purpose. And I think the majority of Americans see through it. And they're just like, there is no hatred, but the elite media, and they are part of, they like going to their cocktail parties. They like having those invitations be spread to them. They want control of Washington, D.C. And so in order to gain that power and access, they've got to toe the line with whatever the narrative is on the left. And so they'll go with it. And it's hate Trump. And I don't know why they're not. Donald Trump's cabinet, by and large, is very, very impressive, filled with people who have had great accomplishments, and they don't get the respect that they deserve. Now, there are exceptions. Everything needs to be a show in Trump world, and sometimes the show gets to be too much, and it distracts from the seriousness of their mission. I'd say Kristi Noem is an example of that.
I'm with Megyn Kelly on that.
I really am. It's just like, you have a very serious mission. DHS is doing an amazing work at the border. You've got the numbers to prove it. You don't need to go out on these raids late night in your ice vest and with your hair perfectly done and your makeup. Like, you don't need to do that show. And then Pam Bondi stepped in it when she was like, oh, we're going to have the Epstein released. And they brought in a bunch of influencers, and it turned out to be nothing. It's like, why do that stuff? It distracts from all of the great work that you're doing. But then you've got, the Linda McMahons, you got the Howard Lutnicks, you've got the Scott Bessents, you've got a great team over at Energy, Chris Wright, Interior, Doug Burgum, that are really approaching their jobs with the conviction to change, the course of this country into what Donald Trump promised on the campaign trail. But the media won't recognize that, because to recognize that would be giving Trump legitimacy, and that's the last thing we want to do.
You forgot on your list of maybe less than perfect cabinet secretaries, Pete Hegseth, who I've argued, looks like he may have been like a Swiss male prostitute who should be at the Gestalt Alpina.
It's more photo op-y than it is. But that is Trump. That is Trump's world, and he does like that.
Yeah, well, and the interesting thing on policy, Hegseth has done, I think, great as far as bringing the warrior ethos, terrific, DEIing the Pentagon, that's awesome. It's just when it comes to the actual management part of the job of transforming the military in light of what we've seen in Ukraine, which is that we really are in a drone warfare world, and things like these $13 billion aircraft carriers, carrier group with 6,000 or 7,000 guys and gals who are extremely vulnerable just isn't going to work. And maybe we shouldn't wait until there's a tragedy to start making changes. He's not the guy to do that. But you're right. Bessent is, I'd say, our best treasurer. I sort of go back with best secretaries of state, and you sort of come to Schultz in the Reagan administration. He was pretty good, although, he squished down a few things. I think he was against saying tear down this wall. So then you have to go back even further to John Foster Dulles. With Treasury, you have to go back really, really far. I don't think Don Regan was terribly good, or Reagan's guys were great. Both Bush's guys, terrible. Trump's first one, Mnuchin, I think people liked him personally, but he seemed to be kind of a panda hugger, and that he was the voice in the room weakening what Trump wanted to do on China. So some really good choices there. Do you Kelly, draw any sort of conclusions with the trajectory of the administration? I mean, it seems like Trump is actually, we're only at, 90, 95 days here. But whereas in previous ones, you saw the writing on the wall, there was going to be high turnover among national security advisors. You knew the SecDefs and Sec states at the beginning were not going to be there at the end. Do you think there's going to be a lot of turnover? Do you think Trump is more willing just to stick it out with his teams throughout the term?
Well, I was worried for Mike Walls there for a bit, and the whole signal leak that was just embarrassing, and embarrassing in the way. How do you get one of the most adversarial reporters on your cell phone and add him into a group chat with all of the highest, national security figures in the world? So So I don't know. I don't know his longevity. I think it's good that when he left his Florida seat that we maintained that. I think if we would have lost that seat to a Democrat, he would have been done. But so he's got time. Hegseth is going to have to prove himself capable of managing the biggest bureaucracy within the federal government and not be backstabbed by people who careers working in there. And also be able to have success in reforming it the way that Donald Trump wants. And God forbid, we do something in Iran. God forbid, Russia makes some sort of move where we have to counter. That's what concerns me. There is his just lack of experience in that role, lack of familiarity around the Pentagon itself. So I'm not sure about his longevity. Lutnick has got a big mouth, and I love New Yorkers. I do. I love his sort of New York. I love it. But he's not a good spokesman for the administration. And it'd be best if he were more like a Wilbur Ross and just kind of executed the vision instead of being out there on the television shows. I think that Kevin Hassett delivers a great economic message.
Always smiles. Kevin always smiles, no matter what he's talking about.
We could be in nuclear war and, 3, 2, 1. And kind of be like, what's up? Just pull through it and just hug your loved ones. It's funny, but like Scott Bassett, I also enjoyed listening to his interviews because there's always more strategy behind what he's saying. He always gives smart answers. I think we're going to see Peter Navarro was able to stick it through all 4 years in Trump's first administration, so I don't expect him to go anywhere, though his visibility might be reduced. But then he'll come back up again, depending on what happens with China. So it's always like this. But I would say the top, and I don't know how much Rubio can take at state. I don't think he doesn't look like he's enjoying his job very much.
He does not look like he's enjoying it.
Everyone always looks better when they leave that building.
Runs for governor. I think he runs for governor just to get out. I told somebody that. Yeah. I think whether he wins or loses at governor, if he loses at governor, he goes down and sits on all those sugar plantation boards and he likes to fish and goes fishing and has his life, and his wife's finally happy that they've got some money in the house and things like that, But I do tend to agree with you. My biggest issue with all of these people, my issue with Christine Noem, to be honest with you, is a loyalty issue to the president. That's my issue there. She looks ridiculous. Megyn Kelly's right. She's got lash extensions on. I'm sorry, I don't know all that well. She's got hair extensions.
Extensions. Yeah.
She's running around. She's holding a weapon improperly that I can see. She's standing in front of these prisoners. And so my point is like, it's almost like a campaign against gravitas. Mm-hmm. And, that she's got someone in her ear, it's almost like, someone from the Miracle on 34th Street, the guy who's the political advisor, the big cigar in her ear saying, you got to get more airtime. You got to get more airtime. And I'm like, we've got the most important thing coming up after they've closed the border. In fairness to the people who work on our border, and I hate to sound like someone just campaigning, they knew what to do all along, and Trump just said, do it. And then they did it, and then magically the border drops. You know what I'm saying? And the Mexicans are given the message, the Panamanians are given the message, and it stopped. But we have the de minimis coming up, which is stopping those packages coming, and that's a massive issue. That has turned into almost $100 billion in terms of things that are coming in through these mail all over the world, and she's got to try. That's her bailiwick. That's what she's got to manage. You don't see her standing out there in that because that's boring. So I mean, my point is like your job is to serve the president. That's one of the things I think Pete will probably be pretty good on. I think he knows he's there. My understanding is he wanted maybe to be Secretary of the Army. That was his hope.
That would be good.
And then Trump upgraded him. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a loyalty thing, and I think that's where we miss. And I'm going to bring up the family. I think we're missing 3 people right now very seriously in this family. I think we're missing Ivana, the daughter. We're missing his daughter,
Ivanka.
We're missing the son-in-law, Jared, and we're missing Eric. Because I think those. What?
Why do you say that?
Because I think those 3 basically looked out for their father. And I think when you have anything in there, it's like, I'll go back, way, way back. And it's like, who had Ronald Reagan's back? Nancy. Who was the one person in Bush 1 White House, the H. Bush, you did not want to get on Barbara's bad side. Okay? And you look at, in fairness to the Clintons, all these people, Reagan had he had his California cabinet. Remember those people? They were around him. You're much younger than I, but you too. But I mean, he had the California cabinet. Clinton had his guys around him. Obama, the first term, had a lot of really good people around him. And then, he got more of the ideologues in my mind in the second term. But my point is, I think the fact of the matter is that what they would do is they would keep an eye out for some of these people who are basically freelancing a little bit. In other words, I don't know why Charlie Kirk and Don, they need to go to Greenland. Why do they need to go to Greenland? You know what I'm saying? Or somebody needs to call Christine in the room and say, Christine, we don't need to see you in your silly little hat anymore out there. Your job is to put on a pantsuit and, just like Janet Reno, and go over and do your job. And I think all the time there, my issue is really about serving your boss. And the President Trump is really doing historic things. I'm out here in Asia, and guys, I get so much grief about, he's killing VOA. He's killing Radio Free Asia. Now, I have some use for Radio Free Asia just because basically it hasn't been completely corrupted. But Voice of America was basically a left-wing Democratic machine, and they went after Trump, and now they're getting it. The other thing is, I have to say, I've dealt with a lot of, probably many more than most people, a lot of tyrants. I've never had somebody come up to me and say, or Duterte or the guys in Thailand say, you got to get rid of that Voice of America thing. In other words, it was basically a job for him. But my thing is, I really think that he needs to, in his cabinet, I think he needs to. Let me ask you a question, Kelly. One more question is what do you see after basically these 100? I mean, he's got almost everything in the air. What do you think he's probably going to be doing? Let's say when we're on day 200, we just don't know, or what do you think? What's his push on day 200?
Well, I think they're coming. There's a lot of pressure, and there'll be a lot of pressure on Congress on day 200, because I remember working in the first administration. Day 100 was largely like, it's a day for the media. Like, here are the accomplishments. But I remember talking to Hope Hicks at the time, and she's just like, we don't have that many accomplishments. Like, how are we going to promote ourselves? Like, and it was always like, as soon as we get tax reform passed, and then I forget when John McCain sank or Obamacare reform, but it was all of the eggs were in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. We got to get that passed. So I think there's going to be a lot of, it is going to go from a shift from what the White House has done to now what Speaker Johnson can deliver before the midterms, because there's also that point, like, okay, we've just got 2 years to get this done and get this codified in the House. And I think there's a lot of priorities that they want to get done. But economically speaking is where all the pressure is going to be, because Trump delivered on immigration. It was one of 2 top issues in the 24 campaign. The economy was the other issue. And right now you see it in the polling. People are scared of his tariff policy. but Republicans are largely and independents are largely willing to back Trump on it and trust that the strategy will work out. But it's when is the American public's patience going to run out in terms of where prices are? Gas is now low, but housing is still unaffordable. The mortgages, the rates are too high for young people to purchase homes. You've got people pulling out of their 401ks to cover basic things like, doctor's appointments and emergency surgeries or whatever. So we see the price of cars is going to start going up to the point where they're going to become unaffordable to the middle class because of all the tariffs that he's put on the industry. I think by the end of the year, they've got to have some economic results that they can point to. And if they don't, and the way that they're going to get those accomplished is going to have to be through Speaker Johnson. And Speaker Johnson has exceeded my expectations. I had very low expectations. He was kind of speaker by default, right? Speaker by accident. Yeah. But he's been able to, so far, so good. But the rubber's going to hit the road this spring, and we'll have an indication of where things will be going by the fall. And if it all fails, then by the end of the year, that you, myself, and all American citizens, we're going to have a tax hike. We're going to have a tax increase, not a tax decrease. And that's going to hit Americans hard as well.
Right. Yes. No, I mean, it's what they just absolutely have to accomplish or else yep. It's going to be a very, very bad term and a very bad future for the new right. All right. That's all the time we have. Thank you, Kelly Sadler. Thank you, Mark Simon. And we will be back soon with another episode of Domino Theory. Bye-bye.